Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Alison Tiemann and I am the host and founder of this channel. And with me today is Hannah Wallen, the host of HBR Talk. I can't believe that's cute. That's terrible. Okay. HBR Talk, which is our Thursday show on Badger live streams. If you want to go to that show, the link will be in the low bar. So please do if of anything that we say is of interest to you. So Hannah, tell me about the topic that's going to be this Thursday and why you chose it.
Well, I'll start with why I chose it. I got started thinking. A colleague of mine on Twitter just sort of found the piece of research that I like to bring out in child support arguments, child support and the indigent obligor. And that bit of research actually found that there was quite a bit of unfair treatment of homeless men, men who simply do not have the capacity to pay what they're ordered to pay by the court, and that we have simply brought back debtors' prisons in the United States and in other countries that do the same thing as the United States with respect to child support. And I was thinking about that as a topic, and I realized it's part of a bigger topic. We have a situation where a double standard doesn't get articulated, but gets used all the time. For the children is seen as a valid excuse to violate men's human rights, whether it's actually something that's for the children or just being done in children's name, as if it's for the children, but without a net benefit to them. Like, so you take away the children's father, and then you bleed him dry, and then you claim that the money is for the children. You're actually damaging the children twice. Once by depriving them of their father's love and care, like up front and up close and personal. He may love them from a distance, but they don't experience it if they don't get to see him. And then again by teaching them that men are nothing but walking wallets, and in particular dads are nothing but walking wallets. And it seems to be perfectly acceptable to harm both the father and the child in this manner, as long as you say you're doing it for the children. But under no circumstances does for the children become the same mantra when speaking about women's human rights, or even things that feminists claim to be women's human rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this expectation that men take responsibility for their children, which isn't necessarily this. We don't see that as much when we're talking about women. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that women, and I think I might have mentioned this before, that women will judge other women for all kinds of things which seem rather trivial. For example, eating sugar during pregnancy, not getting their children into the very best preschool, and all kinds of other sort of trivial things. But when it comes to making sure that your child has a father in his or her life, that's something that nobody judges women for.
Nobody's allowed. But it's
Nobody's
much more
allowed
important, to judge whether you're wearing the right shoes with that dress. That's more important to women than whether or not.
Or if you're too, like if you approve of men too much, if you love men too much, if you care about men too much, it's very essential to shame women for that.
Oh yeah.
But no, it's okay if you want to deprive your child of one of the most foundational and important relationships in his or her life, that is so foundational that it provides several very significant benefits to them emotionally, socially, and ultimately financially. And not financially in terms of direct income from the father, but financially in terms of what the child is able to attain for his or herself. So, but that's okay. That we don't have to judge about that. Even though a woman would judge another woman for leaving a dog in the pound, taking a perfectly fine man who treats them well and just may be slightly boring and divorcing him and then making sure he can't see his kids, that's not something that we can judge. And It's just it is actually pretty astounding to me. And the thing is that a lot of people will say, well, if men got pregnant with or whatever. Well, if men got pregnant, they'd be drafted to give birth whenever the government thought that our population was insufficient. So don't give me that. They would be expected to take responsibility for the privilege of being able to give birth. That's the way we would approach it in that case. If we treated men like women, or sorry, if we treated women like, no, no, no. If men had the powers that women do, they would be expected to put them to service to society. And they probably wouldn't get money for doing those things unless they proved they did them well. But I mean, this is a bit of a digression. I think that it is really critically important because there is a huge gap around our expectations of responsibility for men and women when it comes to reproduction and taking responsibility for their children.
Oh, yeah.
There's a huge latitude for women to simply walk away from their financial responsibilities. We don't even consider that women have financial responsibilities to their children. Women's financial responsibilities have somehow become society's responsibilities to women's children.
Yeah, women
really
don't have those responsibilities. In fact, it's perfectly normal for a woman to get pregnant and then expect your tax dollars to pay not just cash to her or for the food that comes into her house, but also her utility bills, her housing bills, possibly to fix her car, her child care, her medical bills, just everything, every expense. And like Zero Hedge actually did an article a while back that proved that a woman who has maybe 4 kids and doesn't collect too much child support could get the equivalent of $60,000 in annual income from the various government programs that she might be able to access for them. And that's just if she's a good enough mother that she was careful when she was pregnant to not harm the fetus, right? Because now this isn't to say that everybody who gives birth to a disabled child was careless, because sometimes that's genetic and sometimes it's not predictable. But for instance, we're not allowed to criticize women for drinking while they're pregnant, even knowing the risk of fetal alcohol syndrome. And you try it on Twitter. And you start talking about the responsibility of a woman to have responsible sex and to not drink if she's pregnant, and you will get mobbed. I've seen this happen before. And the argument basically is that because there's this one bit of research out there that says that there's a fraction of a chance that semen from a man who consumes a lot of alcohol can also contribute to fetal alcohol syndrome, where it basically the baby might have the tendency toward fetal alcohol syndrome and the weakness of the semen pushes the baby over the edge. That's the man's fault. But the mother still has to drink for that to happen.
Ugh. Well, like I said a long time ago, one of the best things about dads is you can actually have a bad one. People will acknowledge if you've had a bad father, and they'll let you have a bad father. They won't be like, no, there's nothing wrong with your father. You are the one.
You can't talk about your father that way.
Well, you can't talk about your father that way. There's nothing wrong with your father. Everything is what you are the problem. And they will say this when you've had a sexually abusive or a physically abusive mother or an emotionally abusive mother. They will say that. They will essentially blame you as a child for having had that experience. And I'm not saying that this is like a personal experience, but I'm saying that I have seen that happen to abused children who are abused by their mothers. They get blamed for it to an unbelievable degree, especially when it comes to sexual abuse. When you're dealing with female perpetrated sexual abuse, and particularly by the mother, a while back I came across statistics that something like 85% or more of the children who were abused by their mothers sexually were not believed when they told social workers and psychologists and doctors. Like, these are the people who are supposed to actually be, I'm not talking about police, I'm not talking about the general public who are just unbelievably ignorant about everything. I'm talking about people who are supposed to be part of the helping professions, who are supposed to believe people who express trauma information or life experiences about traumatic events. No way. Like they're just only 15% of them actually acknowledged that this was even possible, and actually said to this kid that
the other thing to know about that is that even if they acknowledge that it happened, they don't always acknowledge that it's traumatic.
Yeah.
A child can be yanked out of his parents' home from getting beaten over the head with a baseball bat, and they know that the mother raped the boy, and they don't do anything in terms of trauma management and recovery management for that child with respect to the rape. They only address the baseball bat and the home environment, and they don't do that very well either.
And I mean, I remember reading one psychiatrist's notes. They were doing information or stories about or like doing like longitudinal or what they call like narrative therapy or narrative analysis. And this psychiatrist was talking, or the psychologist was talking about one of her female patients who was actively sexually abusing children, and she basically described it as operationalizing her own like emotional difficulties. And I'm like, what are you going to stop her from abusing the kids? I mean, this is such a blind spot in psychology. I'm getting a little bit off topic, but this particular part,
well,
this
to
particular
a degree, but you think about it again, we get right back to for the children is not a reason to that our society accepts.
No.
You know, to interfere in this woman's life.
Yeah.
Right? She's got children that she's harming, whether they're her children or not. There are children that she's harming, and her life cannot be interfered with, and her doctor doesn't seem to see fit to do anything about this because she's a woman.
Yeah. And it actually really sickens me, because not only does it lead to women getting away with all kinds of things and being supported by the state and getting away with all kinds of things, it means that any woman who actually attempts to lead an ethical life is not regarded in any better terms than a woman who doesn't. In fact, a woman who doesn't is seen as being regarded, a woman who can't control herself, because she's obviously a victim of men. Whereas if a woman does hold herself to an ethical standard, that's internalized misogyny. I mean, it's almost like you're hated more if you're not like a compulsive, abusive, villainous, like your behavior is, you try to be ethical, you try to be decent, and you don't reflect that kind of compulsive victim turned villain attitude. But you know, it's frustrating, because I believe if women's moral agency was recognized, not only would it be better for women, it would also be nice as a woman who's trying to be ethical to be seen as not just like to not have this blanket respect women nonsense applied, but actually to be achieving something and to be regarded with appropriate amount of respect for controlling yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be. And the other thing that happens because of this is that it creates an incentive to support systems that actually are damaging within society. For instance, you take that right back to the child support system. It's entirely dysfunctional, and it damages families. It actually creates a lot of conflict between parents after divorce, and it creates a wedge issue that gets used to sort of pit the parents against each other over the child. And instead of benefiting the child, it actually does harm in a lot of ways. And, you know, it's not that a father couldn't support his child after marriage, but having the state come in and tell him how to do it and when to do it and how much, and decide, you know, he's obligated to do all of that, but the mother is not obligated to include the father in the child's life. Instead of the two of them negotiating that with each other and coming to an agreement and working together on it, that actually splits those families harder and farther and creates a toxic environment. And the child is stuck in the middle of all of that. And, you know, there's guilt because the child goes to dad's house and dad's family is struggling. You know, that household is struggling financially, and the child goes back to mom's house and mom is bad-mouthing dad as this deadbeat loser who can't pay enough to keep their family afloat. Meanwhile, she might be milking second husband for a full income on top of all of that, and working herself. So, like, the child sees all of this and starts thinking the only thing that matters, in my relationship with other people is money. And it does become a very difficult thing for a parent who is genuinely focused on the welfare of the child to alter that mindset so that the child is not trapped in that hell of believing I'm only important because I have a dollar sign on my forehead.
No doubt, eh? Okay, if you would like to hear more on this particular topic, please direct your mouse to the low bar and click the link that will be provided. And it is, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, because I always get something wrong, but this stream, or this topic, this HBR Talk on this topic will be available 7:30 Eastern this Thursday. That is...
That's correct.
Yeah, I think it's the 1st of July.
Yep, the 1st of July.
Canada Day! Yay! All
Yay.
right. So I hope to see you there, and thank you for your kind attention, my lovely specimens.